We're back.
We're back.
All right. So, let's talk about two gentlemen that seem to be very interesting characters. But I thought we could open with, and you know a lot more of these people than I do. So, I'll ask you some questions. You share what
Okay.
you know of this. But let's talk about the gentleman that's
And,
already
and
president.
even though you're saying that I know a lot more than you, I still know very little.
Okay.
Okay, these are 2 cents. And so I hope that everybody out there takes the 2 cents with a grain of salt and then does their own research and makes up their own mind.
That's what we believe in.
Right.
So, the first one is the standing president of El Salvador,
Yes.
which is, his name is Nayib
Bukele. Nayib Bukele.
Okay. So I remember him coming out during the pandemic, and it was a huge thing because of the aid he was giving to the people. But since then, he's done a lot of other things.
Oh. He has transformed El Salvador. Okay?
How?
Oh, well, one of the things that I have friends from El Salvador, and they tell me I can go to the park at night and I don't have to worry about getting stabbed or getting beat up. I can actually open a business and I don't have to worry about that mordida or whatever that potentially I would have to pay to somebody that's not an employee of mine, has nothing to do with my business, and just is there to force me to pay, you know? The kids can actually study, you know? If you have, you know, the young boyfriend and girlfriend can walk to the store and not be worried that some gangster is gonna, you know, do something ugly to the guy and something ugly to the girl. I mean, the peace and tranquility that he has brought to El Salvador, it's day and night. And now he's become like, you know, the poster boy, let's say, for all of Latin America. There's a lot of people that are looking to him to implement some of his ideas in their own country. Okay? Because, you know, he's literally transformed El Salvador from a place that was, let's say, crime-ridden to a certain extent to a place where, you know, it's got the lowest crime in Latin America or something of this nature.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's incredible, okay?
So, and part of that was him apparently locking up and putting in jail a lot of the gangs
Yes.
that the country seemed to be ridden with.
Yeah, they control the country. Apparently, you know, the figures range. I've read an article that says that he put in jail 66,000 Maras. And I've read another one that it's as high as 73,000. So let's say it's in the 70s. He put away 70,000 people that were there just to create chaos and havoc on the innocent population, you know? And so a lot of people look at him as a savior, and because, you know, they can breathe again. They don't have to worry about getting shot or stabbed or mugged or whatever. This is my understanding of it.
Right.
And you can see that investments are coming to El Salvador now. You know, he was recently at one of the Google offices here in California. And, you know, I mean, he's bringing in investments.
Well, if the people see it's safer,
Right.
they're willing to invest. I asked a good buddy whose family is from El Salvador, part of his family, and some of them came to visit recently.
Okay.
And spent a couple of weeks here in California. And I asked them, hey, what do they say about El Salvador? Because I always like to know, like, the people that are in the trenches.
That's the best way, Mike, too.
Yeah, because, you know, you hear different things from news and all that. And so he said that they have said that they feel a lot more safe, a lot safer.
Secure, yeah.
A lot more secure to just go about and do their things because of apparently the president having locked up a lot of the gangs. I'm sure there's still crime,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you can still get into trouble.
Oh,
But
sure. Nothing's perfect.
no, but it seems like this young guy
Young.
has done a lot.
Yeah. He has a vision. And
Yeah.
he's also decreased, and I hope I'm saying this right, but the number of municipalities. I mean, I think he took it like, I'm not sure of this, but let's say from 143 to like 40 or something like that, or maybe that one is Javier Milei in Argentina. But he's brought down the municipalities. He's cut down a tremendous amount of fluff that was in the government, and he's saving. I want to say that I read somewhere around $200 million a year just from that cut down. And he's using that savings to build schools and hospitals throughout the country. So, when you hear that the people are living content and in peace, you got to pay attention to what's happening. And the people are all over the place. I heard a guy in Chile saying, I am the Nayib Bukele of Chile. So that's the kind of stuff that he's, somebody renders themselves with an epitaph like that, you have to worry about. I don't know about that guy, but, show me your actions.
Right.
Okay? And your results before you start,
Yeah.
Because that's what Nayib did, Mr. Bukele.
I remember reading a little bit on, he also brought Bitcoin and made it a currency.
Correct.
For El Salvador, which was like
unheard of.
It was unheard of at that time. Everyone was questioning
Right.
Bitcoin and all that. The U.S. government was trying to get rid of it to a certain extent, it seemed, or just, think a lot of things were coming out negative about it, but he made it a currency that can be apparently, I don't know if it's the currency of El Salvador or it's accepted in El Salvador openly.
Oh,
unlike here.
I think it's accepted openly, but I'm not sure how far that's gone along. That's something that I haven't read a lot on, so I wouldn't be able to comment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I was born in California. You were born in Cuba.
Right.
So every time I would hear about Central, South America, and I've even visited some countries there, it is always in bad shape, it seems.
Sure.
Like, even, I've heard Argentina it hasn't been able to have any form of good government that can make it progress. El Salvador, Mexico, you hear about people that come and try to clean up things, but they end up maybe either not being able to do it or not. Why do you think these countries struggle so much with, maybe that's a deep question, but when you have somebody like a Bukele who seems to be making good progress, it's like you got to protect them, You
have to protect them. Well, first of all, the problem with a conversation like this one is that you get labeled all the time. And I hate getting labeled.
Yeah.
Because, he's a socialist, he's a leftist, or he's a progressive, or, he's far to the right, so he's extremely conservative. Okay? How about just dumping all those titles and just worrying about doing what's best for the people? Okay? And I don't have the answers, and I know very little about it, and so I'm not into politics or anything like that. But Bukele is doing something right because the people feel great, and when he walks out on the streets, the people love him. You can see it. They're able to. He's protecting them and their families, which is the most important thing to them. I mean, from what I hear, they used to live in their homes like in prisons. They will go in there before the night came, and they would never come out till the sunrise.
Yeah.
There were a lot of stuff going out on the streets in the evenings, And so you were asking for trouble and now, I hear that people are walking to the park, are walking to the pharmacy, businesses are open, you can have a pupusa here, there. They seem to have been able to put something together that is flowing for everybody. And why do we have to call him a conservative? Why don't we just call him somebody that had a vision and is doing what he sees as correct for the people?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
El Salvador, I remember in maybe high school watching a movie called Voces Inocentes about what happened in El Salvador, where the guerrillas were taking the young kids and training them, and they would abduct them, and it was very, very sad.
I remember you watching that. It was very sad.
Oh my God. And it's based on a true story.
Right.
And we have friends and family that escaped real bad situations in El Salvador.
Correct.
And I mean, some of these stories
are... like our good buddy. He hid amongst dead bodies.
Jesus.
Him and his wife, right? They both hid amongst dead bodies, and then they came and they looked. There were so many dead people.
And apparently that was because they were persecuting the professors.
Correct.
In that time in El Salvador. So
right.
El Salvador has
gone through a lot.
You look at Venezuela. A good buddy of ours now that recently, within the last 20 years, came from Cuba. So he's sharing with us what the situation is, because he still has family and is very connected to his home in Cuba.
Right.
Because a lot of the Cubans that I grew up talking to came around the revolution. They came in the 50s, 60s, 70s, right?
Yeah.
That was your generation. You came in what, 68?
69.
69, you came to the United States.
Yeah, we left. We were in Spain. He separated us and threw us to Spain.
Yeah.
Over to Spain. And the other family had to go through Mexico.
And so a lot of the Cubans that left in exile or in... they were exiled.
Yeah, we were refugees. We got kicked out of our country. He didn't want us. We were the scum of the earth.
So that generation has one view, but it was interesting to talk to our friend who goes every year to Cuba.
Yeah, he's got a different point of view than I do. I've got, 30 years on? No, I've got 20 years on him.
Right. But he
24 years. I'm 24.
Post
something like that.
The revolution.
Right.
Which is very interesting. You grew up... You were born during the revolution.
During the revolution, but I mean... I never got to see Cuba as a fruitful nation because I was born just when Castro was taking over. So I'm 64 years old. I'm the age of the Communist Party taking over in Cuba. Right. It's lasted 64 years.
Right, because they came January of 1959.
That is correct.
And so your perspective is interesting when you hear about someone like a Bukele or these different gentlemen that are trying to make a change in these countries, because Venezuela, Cuba, all these countries have gone through such difficulty just trying to get ahead, it seems. Like they haven't been able to...
Well, I think somebody rises to power and becomes... You know how they say power corrupts?
Yeah.
And they become greedy, and then they take and take and take, and they give very little back.
Yeah.
And so people get tired over time. There's only so much that people can take. And then when you reach an extreme, then there's an explosion. And that's what a revolution is all about.
Yeah.
I think. I could be wrong, but I think. Yeah. And so that's why, I'm hearing Javier Milei in Argentina. And, I want to believe that he has the power to change. I want to believe.
Right.
Because what I hear him say makes a lot of sense sometimes. Now, he's very powerful in terms of taking over a conversation and stuff like that. So, But he says the right things as far as I'm concerned many times. Not all the time. I don't agree with everything that he says. But for example, he said the other day, "Look, we need to liberate Argentina from all these people that have been here for 80 years. And they took the country from being one of the most fruitful and advanced countries in the world to
Right.
what it is today. People are having a very hard struggle there."
Didn't they used to say Buenos Aires was like the Paris
Oh,
of what, South America or
yeah,
something
for
like
sure.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no
At
doubt.
one point in time,
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess it was.
Buenos Aires, Argentina was thought of like the promised land. Everything that you planted gave,
Yeah.
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 And in all honesty, I have a lot of friends from Argentina, okay?
Yeah.
And every single one of them is super smart. I have never met an Argentinian that is stupid. Never. Okay? They're all super sharp. And so, if they're all super sharp, why is the country the way it is?
Mm-hmm.
And the only answer I can see is the politics. Now, I'm not throwing rocks at anybody because I come from Cuba. And
Right.
I think Cubans are pretty smart too. But look at what happened to our country. And look the way our country still continues to be
Right.
a mess to a certain extent. There are some videos out there of La Habana Vieja, and it's just falling apart.
Yeah.
The buildings are falling apart. There's no monetary fund to fix infrastructure, And how can you develop? It's impossible. You
Yeah.
need infrastructure, you need vehicles, you need cars, you need roads, you need transportation in order to transport goods from one end to the island to the other. So, we're no one to speak of because we certainly made a mess out of our island, Um, so, but I hear Javier Milei, and I want to believe.
Yeah.
I want to believe that he's truthful, and he seems to. He's a little bit, what's the word? Exuberant. He's got a lot of power, and he can overcome you with his voice and stuff like that. And
his words, you could tell he's a wordsmith.
yeah, he's an economist, so he knows exactly. He's talking about el Fondo Monetario, the monetary fund of the nation, and how they landed and became substandard, and But he says things that grip me. For example, he says, "Look, what's going on here? Venezuela is the richest country in the world with oil, and they don't have any oil in their country. Cuba is the country that has the most sugar cane and sugar fields in the world, and yet Cuba doesn't have any sugar. Argentina is the country that has the most vast lands in meat and cows, and we don't have any meat for our population." So the countries that he names that are richest in these products,
Natural resources.
these products are lacking to every single one of their or to many of their people. So things like that, and you got to be careful, because I remember growing up with my uncle saying, "Hey, you got to be careful about guys that talk a lot about equality or this or that, because they, you got to watch out. Communism may be one step behind, or, because all these generations have been, what's the word I'm looking for? Traumatized,
Yeah.
I
I think, yeah, it's traumatized.
a lot of the Cubans, when we left,
Yeah.
you're traumatized,
traumatized.
Because of all the things that you have experienced and lived. And
Well, I was sharing recently with a lady whose family is from Puerto Rico,
okay,
which is right next to Cuba. It's an island, very similar cultures. And I was explaining that, when your mom, my grandma, requested to leave the country, you were a traitor. You were unable to salute the Cuban flag anymore.
right,
You were called a gusano. You were
a worm.
you were leaving the country. And so there was a situation where they would go into grandma's house and they would survey all the things that were in the house.
Correct.
And because they belonged to the government at that point.
Right.
Once the revolution came. And there was that one time that grandma had given to her friend a frame,
Yes.
a picture,
Mm-hmm.
and replaced it with another one. And when that person came to survey and they noticed that the dust marks were not the same as the frame that was there, they told her, hey, you better put that frame back.
Or you can't leave the country.
Correct. Now, when I was explaining this to this young lady, she couldn't believe it.
Oh, you gotta live it.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
and I think that a lot of these stories, you know, we grew up hearing them because grandma was a storyteller.
Right.
But some people, after going through these traumas, did not share these stories.
Correct.
They decided, I'm going to keep this to myself. I'm in a new land, opportunity. My kids and the future generations don't need to hear some of this stuff.
Right. Well, Abuelo Jose, your abuelo on your mother's side, he was in the Korean War. And he never once talked about it that I am aware of. And you can ask your mom.
Yeah.
You know, he was in there. And I don't know how deep he was involved in the fighting or whatever, but your grandpa never, ever hey, I remember telling him, hey, Jose, you were in the Korean War? Yeah?
That's it.
That was it.
Yeah.
No additional comments.
So some people, that's the way they coped with it. That's the way they dealt with it.
Yes.
But it was interesting because it was like, whoa, really? That happened? It's like, yeah, everybody, there was somebody on your block that would survey the activities going on, and they would have to report to a committee of what was going on.
Right.
And grandma, who was she was outspoken.
Well, she got herself into a lot of trouble.
She got herself into trouble because she wasn't in favor of what was happening. And you had to leave it all, right? They surveyed it all, and you had to leave.
We left
everything.
with 22 pounds of clothing.
Couldn't sell your house.
The minute you file for a visa to leave, to come to the United States, but essentially they knew that everybody was going to end up somehow, if they could, in the United States. Now, when we spread throughout the world, we stayed in different places. There were a lot of Cubans in Panama, a lot of Cubans in Dominican Republic. Some of us
Mexico.
stayed in Spain. A bunch of them went to Mexico and stayed there.
Right.
Because these are cultures that we could blend into, and
Spanish speaking.
And they're somewhat similar.
Yeah.
Because Spain controlled Cuba for 100 years.
Yeah.
So we have that.
I think over 100.
Well, in the Philippines, there were 300 years.
Oh, wow.
But in Cuba, there were 100 years, or maybe a little bit over 100. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I always say 100. But the thing is, with these two characters, Bukele, Nayib has proven himself, I think. Now, the other day I was reading an article, and I have to go back to it because I was distracted by a couple of things that were happening in the household. But it was regarding that he might step down from his post. And I hope that's wrong. I hope that's incorrect, let's say.
Yeah.
Because in my eyes, I feel that he's doing so good for the country that I feel he should be reelected and continue on his mission with whatever vision he has, As far as Argentina, the elections are coming up this month. Well, I think the 21st or the 22nd.
Of September.
Yeah.
One thing with being reelected, as long as there's I think, just my opinion, as long as there's a time period where, okay, eventually you can't continue. Like in Argentina, that family, the husband and the wife were, or I don't know if she even still is, were super long time were president there.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember those. Like eventually, like if it's a 4-year, like in the United States, you have a maximum of 8 years.
Yeah, but that's only for the presidential seat.
That's what I'm talking about.
I know, but...
For Bukele.
Oh, for Bukele, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So like once
Bukele's only been there 4 years.
He's I think
made
2019.
He's made this change in El Salvador in basically the last...
4 years?
Yeah, almost. Not quite, I think. And so it's been a tremendous change, and literally 4 years is like saying overnight.
Yeah. No,
Because-
all I'm saying is that eventually you got to find somebody else.
Right.
You know, you can't be there for 20 years.
No, you can't. But then again, look at our councilmen, congressmen. You know,
But president
you've
is-
got people in wheelchairs in our Congress here. We should have term limit. Seriously, I mean,
But-
it sounds.
but the
you got people
presidential-
that seem like they're, they checked out.
Yeah, no,
5
I hear
years
you.
ago.
Yeah, on no matter what side. But
Yeah, I don't care. I'm not not Republican, not
Yeah.
Democrat.
But what I'm telling you is that the presidential position
4 years.
usually has
A time frame.
A time frame. But for some reason in Argentina, that family, the husband and the wife, it seems like they've been there forever.
But as president,
Yeah.
really? Okay. Well, I'm not aware of
Let's
that,
look
so
it
that
up.
shows you how little I know.
Let's look it up. Okay, now it's a guy named Alberto Fernandez. He's the president since 2019. And prior to that, it was it would be
I don't know that, recently they've been able to stay there so long.
no.
If you're talking about Perón or whatever, I don't know. If you
No,
go
it
way
was
back.
it was a weird. It was a name like it was a woman. Christ.
No, but I think that she's in political power. I don't think it's the presidency. I think
Okay.
it's councilmen and congressmen and whatever is the equivalent in Argentina. They've been there forever. According to this guy, they've taken Argentina down into the dumps for the last 70 years or 75 years. And I've been following this guy.
She was president from 2007 to 2015.
Wow. Wow.
That's how many years is that? 7. That's almost. That's almost. That's 8 years.
8 years.
8 years. Okay.
Two
Well,
terms, maybe.
2 terms, maybe. Okay.
So that doesn't sound way out of whack.
And
to
then
me.
the guy before her was her husband,
That's a problem.
which presidency of Nestor Kirchner, which began in 2003 to 2007.
Yeah, see, when you have the same family, yeah. Look, what do I know about anything? But it doesn't smell right. He was there for 2 terms and she's there for 2 terms. That's 20 years.
He was there. No, he was there 1 term.
Oh, okay. Well,
And then you have. Okay, so I guess it's every 4. I didn't know that because
Okay.
I just saw her there for
no,
so
but there are
long.
people apparently in
Macri was.
the problem is
4
apparently
years.
in the municipalities you get family members that get that come into work or whatever,
Right.
and they get government posts and this and that. I mean,
But they're not necessarily. It's not presidential. Got it. Okay.
Right.
No, I was wrong on that. Well,
but look, I'm for good or for bad. I'm on social media a lot, okay, and I see. My heart goes out to the older crowd, the guys that work the land, the campesinos, the farmers, right?
mhm.
And they have this faith that Javier Milei is going to help get Argentina out of the slump that it is.
I hope he does.
And he provides a direct attack to the people that are in power today, saying that they have not done anything for the country or its people, that they've only benefited themselves and their families. And he names it, he calls it, he's very abrasive.
Hmm.
Okay? He says,
Calls
hey,
him out.
he calls them out. He says, hey, you came out of your Audi 500 or Audi 800 and this and that, and you got, how many cars do you have? Oh, yeah, you have 4 cars. The other 2 are Mercedes, and then you have a Rolls. And you, what about you? You're staying in the... So he calls them out that you've got all this wealth accumulated to yourself, but what have you done for the country?
Right.
And so what he's saying is, look, give me... He said it. He's very good on words. I don't know. I want to believe.
Yeah.
Right? Does Argentina need a change? It seems to me that yes, based on what I hear the older folk on the street talk about. You're talking about little old ladies and older gentlemen that are saying, "Oh, I'm gonna vote for Javier, Milei." But why? Well, porque we need to change the country. Necesitamos cambiar el país.
Yeah.
You know, we've had the same baloney way too long, and so what I see is that he's given hope
Yeah.
to all these people. I just pray that he's not a false prophet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I pray. And so what's happening, Mike? Since I'm on social media a lot, and you know the algorithms, you click on him and you get more. You click on him and you get more. I got stuff on Bukele all day long. I got stuff on Milei all day long. You know, and you don't know to one extent what to believe and what not to believe. But they have given hope. Okay, Bukele through his actions, he's turned El Salvador around. Okay?
Yeah.
And Milei has not had an opportunity yet, but it seems like he means well.
Yes.
We need to be careful. He's got some radical ideas, but what is the counterpart of it?
So I think it's good because you brought both of these to Bukele went viral with the pandemic because of the way he was handling it.
Yeah.
I think he was even giving shipments of medication to the people or certain treatments. Like he was handled it. Everyone was like, "Wow, look how he's handling." He stopped the payments on all mortgages. You fact check me on this, okay? But I remember him coming out and saying,
You know, now that you mentioned that, I think you're right. Yeah.
he stopped the payments. He says, "You guys aren't working. You don't have to pay that mortgage." And then eventually, it came back, I imagine. I didn't. But he was one of the first to come out and do that. And everyone was like, whoa, that seems like it's right. If the government's telling you can't work, then they shouldn't expect us to make those payments, right? It just seemed logical. Because if not, they're going to lose the property that they've worked hard for or whatever. So he went viral with that during the pandemic. And then you've introduced me to Milei, which I had never heard of before. And I think it's good to know what's out there, and everybody's going to do their own research. And like you said at the beginning, it's not like we're necessarily saying that this is good or bad or anything. It's just bringing up these gentlemen, these topics. And I think it's a good discussion.
I think so too. Like, for example, look, if politics is, I think personally, and these is just my opinions, right? So if anybody disagrees with my opinion, God bless you for it, because, all we're doing is just conversing. But if whoever's running against Milei is not doing a very good job, because I think he's controlling social media all over the place. He's the one that pops up for me. Where is the opposition? Who's running against him exactly? And if I do find somebody, it's a very short snap. I mean,
well, he's the way that he speaks catches you.
Yeah,
it catches the viewer, and that's one thing that is good. And the other side is you got to be careful, because I've studied and we've talked about, but I like watching interviews of some of these past individuals that have, what do we say, they've mastered
charisma?
The art of speaking.
Oh yeah.
The charisma that they have.
Well, yeah.
And some of
They're
them
eloquent, like Fidel Castro.
Some of them used it for good, and others not for good. Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez. You couldn't catch them. It was very difficult.
Right.
They were masters at the art of speech and communication.
And they were very bright. They were smart.
Yeah.
And so they would not allow themselves to be cornered.
Right.
They were slippery like a wet soap.
I'll never forget that one interview with Barbara Walters and Fidel Castro, where she throws at him, you don't have freedom of speech in the media, right? Because he was controlling the news outlets. That's one of the first things that he did, from what I understand. It was to control the news outlets. And then he says, your definition in the United States of freedom of speech is different than ours in Cuba.
Can you imagine?
It was something along those
He
lines.
just threw a big, huge block at her head. I mean, because you hear that and you go, oh, now he can go ahead and teach her
Right.
from a pulpit. He's
Right.
the professor, and he's going to
And
enlighten
he
you.
can come out and say, oh, because
Whatever.
your freedom of speech could be misinformation, it's propaganda, blah, blah, blah. And so I'll link that in the description. That was super interesting, the way that he handles that. But going back to these two gentlemen, I think it's great that these people give hope. I personally think you got to be careful
Yeah.
with anybody that's coming out saying one thing, because politicians at the end of the day, they do what they say, what they need to say to get in office, it seems. But what I like about Bukele is it seems that, like you said, the actions, his actions are doing the talking for him.
Right. So, I mean, he's got some very interesting ideas, and I think he the other day said some not too good things about the Pope, I believe.
Oh, Milei?
Milei, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's getting blasted over that, I think.
Which the Pope happens to be Argentinian also.
Which he happens to be Argentinian also. And so, but barring a couple of, I'm not in total agreement with what he says. I think I would be blinded if I were. But a lot of the stuff that he says, I love to believe. And that's what I think he's captivated. Because I think that he won the primaries or whatever with an overwhelming vote. And then I saw some Argentinian program where the guy was saying, hey, he's got it. He's in already as president. And the other guy says, well, what do you mean? And he goes, yeah, because the ones that were going to vote for this person, at least 10 to 20% of that is going to vote for Milei. And then those that were going to vote for this guy, at least 20% are going to vote for them. And then he's going to carry his own people, which is this. So by the time you add them together, it's a done deal. And so I hope, because I think there's a lot of people from Argentina that are, from what I see, the interviews, want some kind of a change. They want to believe. And I just pray to God that he's not a false prophet.
Yeah.
Because you just never know,
Yeah, I think, I hope, we can't vote. We have no, but we just can speak from our perspective, mine being born here and hearing stories and everything from.
Yeah. And somebody might say, hey, you're Cuban. What do you know about politics? You messed up your own island, and you be right. What do I know about politics? Very little. And did we mess up the island? We sure did. We sure did. We allowed someone to come in and take the place of a previous dictator, and that person lasted 60-something years. He just died, but I'm 64, so I think he lasted like 58 years in power. And he really, truly messed up a lot of things. Now, if you look at individual quadrants, you might be able to say, oh, he gave a lot to education here. More people are educated today than before, this and that. But where do they work? Where is the la fuente de empleo? Where are the jobs coming from? Why is it? And no system is perfect. It's what Patrick Bet-David says. No system is perfect, but I'll stick to capitalism. That's what he says.
One of the things that this gentleman, doctor from Venezuela, shared with us, which I thought was so interesting. He says that Venezuela lost their greatest asset.
Oh, yeah.
And that hit me when he said that. He says, Venezuela already has lost their greatest asset, which was their people.
Their people.
The engineers, the doctors, the scientists, the people that were actually, making changes, positive things for Venezuela. They all fled.
They all fled.
The ones that could.
The ones that could, yeah.
And that was interesting because that's the most valuable resource, he said, You know, it's even greater than oil and all these other things. Is your people.
Yeah,
And
you know,
he
the
lost
other
them.
day, you weren't around. I don't know where you were, but I went to Portos with Mom for breakfast, and we were waiting for the kids and stuff. And so you know, you pay. I mean, you order, and then they say, go and stand over here, and when the food comes out, you can pay and this and that. There was a guy standing there, and he was waiting for a while, and so, you know, I said, you know, we're waiting for a while, but you know, the food is good. And he goes, yeah, it's good to wait. And he had a big accent, and I said, are you Cuban? And he goes, no, I'm from Venezuela. And I'll tell you, there was a bond between him and I, because we went through the same thing. We both have suffered the same thing.
Very
He fled
similar.
his country, and so when I see a Venezuelan person, they, you know, even though I'm not Venezuelan, we have a bond. There's a bond because we have suffered the same thing, you know, and it was really cool, you know, because he said, hey, you know, my country is a mess too now. And I said, it was a beautiful country. And he goes, well, so was yours. You know, and there was a very nice conversation for a very short 2 minutes,
Yeah.
you know, there. And then,
And you're here in the United States
and we're
now.
here in the United States, but we bonded. We
Yeah.
could feel the love.
Sure.
And then he sat somewhere else, and I sat over here. And when he took off, he took off before I did. He turned around and looked for me, and I looked at him, and he said, you know, goodbye. I'll see you again. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
You could feel the love, because when people suffer the same perspective, then there's a bond that unites them. And I remember the gentleman. It was very cool. So I
Yeah.
just hope that Bukele stays up there and continues with his vision, because I think that based on, you know, his performance, he's doing a really good job. Okay, and I hope and pray that this guy Javier Milei ends up being whatever is best for Argentina. Irregardless, I don't care about the right. I don't care about the left. I don't care about, you know, the Democrats and the Republicans. Let's just get someone that can push the country forward. Okay.
Yeah.
And help everybody, you know, and not let power corrupt them like it's usually the case. And maybe I'm being naive, Mike. Maybe it's not possible at all. When you get to that level,
Yeah.
you see all this power, and you think you're somebody, and you know.
We don't
Mike
know.
Tyson is very leery of that. He says, I don't want to deal with power. And he says that he's got a dark, or a guy that he doesn't want to let out, which is like an evil guy, or he doesn't call it evil, but the dark side or something. And, you know, he's like repressing it, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just hope that it works out.
Let's see.
I hope, man, because I see the people wanting something new for the people, you know, and
Yeah.
they deserve it, you know. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing, you know, about these two gentlemen and your perspective on it and our perspective on it.
Well, it's
Yeah.
current affairs. I'll tell you that.
See what happens.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.